What is your name?
Mauricio de la Parra.
What is your relation to Adrian Volpe?
Adrian is my nephew.
What do you know about the Della Parra family?
Well, the Del Parra family, as far as it relates to me, is from two different parts. It's my mother's side, which is the Muñozes, and my father's side, which are the De la Parras. The Muñozes, my mom was a first generation Mexican. Both of her parents came to Mexico from the dictatorship of Franco in the Second World War and met in Mexico City. On my father's side, they are third generation Mexicans who had come to Mexico from Spain also, but earlier in Spanish history.
In your opinion, what is the most interesting or unique thing about our family?
So two things come to mind. One is a story of how my mother's family made it to Mexico, and it was really interesting because they used a stamp smuggling business to get their family from Spain to Northern Africa, Morocco specifically. And when they finally got to Morocco, because of their affiliation with stamp collectors, they also knew a lot of people that could forge documents, and they were able to get a fake passport for my grandmother so that she could get asylum in Mexico. And she came to Mexico, to Veracruz, and then eventually Mexico City, just because of her family's connection to the stamp trading business. So I think that's a really interesting recent history of our family. On the Del Parra side, one of the most interesting things I think is there was a publishing empire built on one of our great aunt who developed a story called Mingwin Pingwin, which is a really famous popular children's character and comic book story that eventually became a huge publishing house, which today includes a lot of soap operas, Mexican soap operas, and magazines, and even to the point where a lot of their descendants, my cousins, are like actors and stuff in Mexico. So I think those are two very interesting recent history aspects of our family.
What is the origin of the Della Parra family?
So the Del Parra family, as far as I know, and as far back as I can, as I've heard, we were Arab Jews, also known as Sephardic Jews, who went to ancient Spain, and when the Inquisition occurred in Spain, we were forced to change our name from our Jewish name to De La Parra, and the Del Parra was a descriptive name that literally meant the people from the vineyard. And so we were Sephardic Jews who were forced essentially to change their name during the Christian or the Catholic Inquisition into the Del Parras.
What is the origin of the Muñoz family?
I have been able to trace the origins of the Muñoz family as far back as Hernan Cortés, who was one of the original explorers who came to America. Beyond that, there's actually a very rich history of naval travel in our family, going back even to Gaelic era, which includes northern Spain, Scotland, and Ireland, and maybe somewhere in there also some Viking from the Nordic countries. So we have a rich naval history in our tradition, at least on the Muñoz side, even going even as far back as Hernan Cortés, which I think is very interesting.
How many deceased members of our family did you meet? Who were they?
So I'll start with one of my earliest memories, and one of the oldest was my father's grandmother, Conchita. She was 105 years old when she died, and I was about 4 years old. So I knew her, I met her. My grandmother on both sides, Maria Elena de la Parra on my dad's side, and Maria Luisa Coter on my mom's side. My grandfather on my dad's side, Cayetano de la Parra. A great uncle of mine named Guillermo de la Parra. Another great uncle of mine named Gustavo de la Parra. One of my favorite aunts, Marga de la Parra. My mother, Marisa. And I know there have been more, but I just can't think of them now. Gabriel de la Parra, also a great uncle.
What is a family tradition that we have maintained and carried on?
One that I can think of is our stamp collecting tradition. We, for over a century now, have been collecting stamps. So much so that the same collection has been handed down from generation to generation, to the point that Adrian has contributed to our stamp collection. And I have contributed, my mother has contributed, my brother, my grandmother, her siblings before her, and her parents before her. So a multi-generational stamp collection that exists today, and I actually have in my house.
What is your name?
My name is Tanya Moreno de la Parra.
What is your relation to Adrian Bulbe?
I am his mother.
What do you know about the De La Parra family or Moreno family?
Well, I know that the De la Parra family came from Spain. My mother's maiden name is Munoz, which came from Galicia. And I married my wonderful husband, Juan Carlos Moreno. I inherited his last name, and they are originally from Mexicali.
In your opinion, what is the most interesting or unique thing about our family?
Well, I think to make it interesting and spicy, I know that all families have skeletons in their closet, and one that back in the day when it was not culturally accepted for women to have babies or children out of wedlock, my grandmother had a son who was raised to be my father's uncle, which he was really his brother. So we all knew him as our Uncle Güero.
What is the origin of our family as far as religion, ethnicity, nationality, or culture goes?
Well, coming from Europe, we are a bit of a melting pot. We have a little bit of Spanish blood, as well as Irish, Scottish, and overall, due to the fact that we had lived the majority of our lives in Mexico, we do consider ourselves Mexican, Hispanic. Religion, we were raised Catholic. Some of us have chosen different religions as we have gone older. We have an uncle that's Buddhist, a couple atheists in the family, and quite a few Christians.
How many deceased members of our family did you meet? Who were they?
I would probably want to keep this question with the immediate family. My grandmother, who was Maria Luisa Coter, she lived to be 90 years old. She was from Galicia, Spain. As well as my grandmother from my father's side, she was from Mexico City. And I didn't get to meet my grandfather from my mother's side because he passed away when my mother was 5. Did not get to meet very many. I have not yet traveled to Spain, but one day we hope to take that trip to Spain and meet the mother side of the family.
What is a family tradition that we have maintained and carried on?
When it comes to traditions, I believe that food is probably one of the most important ones. It's what brings our family together. If it's not Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, and our typical Friday night dinners. One tradition that we have maintained throughout the years would probably be having dinner every night at the dinner table with either a famous dish of my mother's or a famous dish of my husband's. I would probably say paella or enchiladas suizas would probably be one of the most famous dishes that we have carried on throughout the years.
What is your name?
My name is Juan Carlos Moreno.
What is your relation to Adrian Volpe?
My relation to Adrian Volpe is I'm his stepfather.
What do you know about the Moreno family?
The Moreno family is made up of different backgrounds. We have predominantly Mexican, and then from my maternal side, they're Sonorense, and my grandfather is from Santa Rosalia, and he has French, he has Indian, he has Scottish, and I'm sorry, Irish blood, and my father's side, they're from Durango, but they all lived in Mexicali.
What is the most interesting or unique thing about our family?
I would say that we're made up of different fabrics. There's a lot of different backgrounds, and we're able to come together and make something special. And a lot of unique things is that we all carry different traits, and we bring to the family, and we are making our own traditions as well at the same time. I think that's what makes it unique.
What is the origin of our family as far as religion, ethnicity, nationality, or culture goes?
I would have to say that we're Mexican, predominantly from the Moreno family, Catholic. Culturally, I consider myself Mexican American, and so a lot of the traits that come from the Mexican side of the family in the U.S., we've grown to make them a little different here. I think that's it.
What is the most interesting or unique thing about our family?
I have two. One is my grandmother comes from the Yaqui Indians, and so we have a strong heritage there with the Indian culture in Sonora. Another interesting fact, I think, is my father. When his father came to this country, his real last name was Ramirez, and it was cut off because when you immigrate to the country, you have a double last name, and his last name was Moreno Ramirez, which Ramirez was the predominant last name, but they cut it off, and so we stayed here in this country as Morenos.
How many deceased members of our family did you meet?
I've had the chance to meet several of them. I think my paternal father, my paternal grandfather, passed away when I was born, so I didn't get a chance to meet him. I met my grandmother, my dad's mother. She was a short, young lady, and she died at an early age. She had 9 children, and all 9 children have their own kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. Just recently for Thanksgiving, we had 95 family members show up to one Thanksgiving party, so that's a pretty big family. And I haven't really met many more.
What is a family tradition that we have maintained and carried on?
I think we all have strong family values. My grandparents have been married for over 60 years. My parents have been married for over 35 years. I think traditions and values are very important. For that same reason, I think it's important that we all get together. We've had many anniversaries in our families, and I think that those are all worth celebrating. Traditions we want to keep, strong family values. Our reunions that we have, like the one I mentioned earlier, is one that's pretty unique, that every Thanksgiving that I know of, we've always had the Moreno family get together, and always a big party shows up. And so I think I want to continue to carry that trait in this family. It's a conglomerate of many things between the Volpes, the La Parros, Morenos, Araizas, and so that's what we'll continue to do.